This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. Now you're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. The Galway senior footballers are still alive after the weekend, a dramatic win in Breffni Park, but they progress now into the preliminary quarter-final where they face down in Newry, Port Kessler on Sunday at 1:45, so that's where the attention will be for Galway football fans this weekend. But closer to home, we actually had the club championship draws taking place tonight, and they took place in the senior and intermediate football championship. So we will come to that first since it's just been done. But we'll touch on the senior draw first, then move on to the intermediate, and then get straight into the action. So in Group 1 of the Senior Football Championship, Salta, Knocknacarra, Montbellion, Mallow, St Michael's, Oughterard. Group 2, Mycullen, Berna, James's, Killannon. Group 3, and probably the group of death, Tuam Stars, Claregalway, Dunmore McHale's, and Annadown. And then in Group 4, Curfin, Monavea Abbey, Milltown, and Leitrim Moor. Mart, what do you make of those groups?
Geez, it would focus on mine anyway. As it tends to do these draws, I suppose. And there's probably an element where you're kind of parties kind of hoping to see them ready sooner in the year just to get it over and done with. I suppose like the first thing, there's a lot of talk about what the structure of the year, and so if theoretically now if Galway make a All Ireland final, you're looking at mid-August before this is starting. No matter what happens, the kind of final has to be, or the county final has to be played on 26th of October. That's the date. So the only adjustment is when we actually get going. Uh, Overall, I think there's intrigue in every single group. Paul probably avoided that scenario, which maybe manifested a small bit in hurling, which is that because we only see semi-finalists, we end up with maybe slightly lopsided groups in certain cases. And I know the case has been made a couple of times that is it actually worth seeding down to quarterfinals if you're going to have this structure. But no, look, overall, I think there's enough intrigue in every single group to keep it relatively entertaining. Your first round games are going to be, geez, you'll have some blockbuster games to kick that off there. Saltella Mount Bellew looks like that could be an absolute cracker to get things going. Tuam and Galway, I think it's the third year in a row that two of them would have played. So yeah, look, there's enough there that means that we won't be short of things to talk about.
Just on it, because the league semi-final is obviously coming up this weekend,
Yeah.
and I think there's going to be a lot of clubs trying to look for a fixture during the week, given what's on the pitch this weekend for Galway teams. Do you think we have it right there, or do you think maybe we could stretch the league out a bit closer? Because in one sense, there is a challenge when it comes to the summertime about clubs trying to get challenges, and they probably won't play teams from their own county, and then they have to go looking further afield.
Yes and no. I think like I think we're very close. I heard you talking to Murph and James about this last week. I think we're very close to the sweet spot from a Galway perspective. And I think actually, Paul, it's worth stressing that because of some of the conversations we're hearing nationally now about pushing the All Ireland final into August. And it's worth taking a moment to consider what that would mean for Galway GA. Like I mean, properly looking at on black and white on paper and think about it. If the football final goes back to the 17th of August, as Jarlath Burns said last week, I think Galway realistically we've 5 rounds for a football championship. That's all we're getting. Like I can't see any more space than that. In which case we're going back to one round back door and you're out. Like that's the reality of it. And
Do you think
the
that's
reason
unfair for club players?
absolutely, man,
Yeah.
yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Well, I was at. I know this is like it's a tangent, and people
Mm.
find this kind of boring, but just bear with me for a second, right? I cover Galway Convention every year for work, and at Galway Convention they do like they come with their I's dotted and their T's crossed, and they present a fixture analysis report for Galway games. So it's a breakdown of nearly 900 games. These were the 900 games that were played last year. 887 of them were scheduled on time. How many of them were conceded? How many of them were rescheduled? And they break them down by every single club. And at the end of it, they say if you're playing for your adult first senior team, so if you're playing for what your club's first team, we can guarantee you 12 games, right? We can guarantee you 12 games. If you're playing for your second grade team, like so someone like me who's playing junior football, we can guarantee you 8 games. Now, when you think about that, like from a participation perspective, it's not a lot. It's, 12 games
Yeah.
is not massive. Uh, and the idea that we should reduce that is just absolute insanity, and it should be fought tooth and nail because what like, I right now I think in what we have we're in a very good situation. 12 isn't a lot, but it's decent, and the league this year has been very competitive. I've seen a huge amount of games, thankfully, both in that and the Comortis, and seems a real the standard of teams across the board now. I think the football championship is set to see a couple of teams that I'm really interested to see if they maintain the form they're on. Uh, but go back to that basic point. 12 games. That's what you're guaranteeing. That is not a lot, and it's a good system. But the idea that we change that to reduce it is, I just think, is ludicrous.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I know Galway have even been vocal on this when it's came to it. We've even seen Paul Bellew and Claude Gagan and various members of Galway GAA have been vocal on it. I think if you're asking club players to put in an effort all year, they deserve this, as you've mentioned there. If we're to just get, it's probably early to be getting predictions from you, but from when it comes to the senior championship, at the minute, who are your favourites to win the senior football championship?
You still can't look away from Corofin. Like you just can't. Regardless of anything really. I will be kind of curious. I think we are approaching a situation where you might see the most tactical creativity from club teams rather than county teams because they'll have seen they've had more time. That counties are reacting to these new rules in certain cases very quickly when it came to the 12 versus 11. Clubs have had a bit more time and they'll have seen what has worked at a county level and be able to theoretically implement that in clubs. And you have a lot of people who are very connected to county setups in Galway clubs. So a guy like Kevin Walsh, for argument's sake, what he might have garnered over the year and how he'd apply that with Killannon. Um, from a Corofin perspective, Jerry McGowan is somebody who's been very involved in the county scene. What he will be able to, I have no doubt, take from what he has seen so far and implement for Corofin. So things like that will be really interesting to see. That's. But sorry, to answer your question, I think I right now you just can't look past them.
Who's the bolter? Who's going to come out of the blue this year?
I don't know if they're gonna if how far they'll go, but I mean, I saw Lettermore play Michael and the Comortis, Barna twice, once in the league, once in the Comortis. Uh, Holy hell, they are some team at the minute. Like they are just uh, nobody involved with Galway, so they have full availability, legs all over the pitch. Casey must be as fit as he's ever been. Miles McDonough was playing wing forward against Barna 2 weeks ago, and he is relentless. Alan Murphy on the line, a real Alan Murphy team. Like the way that they defend, their language, the way they talk about positives and negatives, uh, how diligent they are, their lack of tolerance for lads who foul. Like they do not want to concede frees, but very well set up defensively. So if I'd be really interested to see how they go. Like really interested. I just think they've always been a pretty impressive club, but by every time I see them this year, I'm more and more impressed. They went out to Moycullen in a Comortis game, and geez, they just conquered midfield that day. And that was before some of the lads went away. So Jared Avon was playing that day, Designee was playing that day, and let's more give him an absolute bag full of it. So if I more so, they're a team I'm looking forward to seeing, like seeing can they maintain the trajectory they're on because I have been impressed by what I've seen so far.
Yeah, they have been really impressive in Division One too. They have really have been one of the standout teams. Then just the intermediate football championship draw. Group One, Ormore Mary, Cork Shamrocks, Meath Brannocks, St Brendan's. Group Two, Calstrand, St Gabriel's, Illanorn, and Kirpin B. Group Three, Calfrec, Carnclanburn, Menlough, Clifton. Group Four, Glenamaddy, Oncarua, Kilconnelly, on Spidia. Was only chatting to someone earlier on, Maurice. I definitely think this is one of the most difficult years to actually pick an outright winner of the Intermediate Championship.
Big time, yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people or more are their current favorites. But then you look at that group, man, and there is nothing easy there. Uh, like that is uh like a core two team. I saw them play a challenge earlier this year. They looked really impressive. Michael Bannock's major ambitions to get back up. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing easy there. I would say these groups are arguably more balanced than maybe some of the championship groups, which is no mean thing either. So yeah, look, that's like you want to talk about some blockbuster matchups. That first round is going to be absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. No, it really is there, the intermediate championship, and it's always been so competitive. So the senior and intermediate championships thereafter, whenever Galway are finished, that's something for supporters to look forward to. But at the minute, county team obviously still the focus for Galway supporters. Bart, how did you feel coming out of Breffni Park? Was there in the last few minutes? I know as journalists when you're working at these games, you always try and contain yourself, but I'd say, but was this one of the times where it's hard?
How did I feel leaving? I felt uh, relieved because I got locked in and had to hop a gate down the back to get into the car park and came very close to slapping my ankle. Um, I, I don't know. People are going to roll their eyes at this answer, I would imagine, but I have to say, like, there was a bit of kind of, I don't know, is pride the word, but admiration really for these lads as a group, like this team in particular. They're just they're a very likable bunch in a football sense, obviously, in terms of the way that they play and what they absolutely emphasize. Even if things aren't going well, just to see that the sheer honesty within them is very admirable. But I have to say, Paul, that the thing that was in my head most was um like park football for a second, right? Like this probably wasn't the best organized game I've ever worked, to be honest. Not just because I was locked in, but the thing after the game, there was a bit of messing about media, and it was going on a while, and we were out in the car park waiting for Galway, and then we were brought back in. There was lot of kind of messing, but eventually, anyway, we got talking to both managers, and then we are going back in. Met Shane Walsh coming out, and he very generously stopped to talk to us for a little while, and he spoke to us about a team exercise they did recently, where the group were giving him words of encouragement, right? Like they were talking pretty obvious that his confidence hasn't been what it was, injured throughout the kind of championship, taken off in his last two games. So they spoke to him about where he was at, his form, and how they back him to take their shots, why they trust in Shane. And he was telling us that he was thinking about that in the game yesterday. And when you consider that, like the idea that, you know, it's kind of a trite thing, like, but people, and especially male Gaelic footballers, are not good at telling each other how they feel about each other or talking in a way like that. Like a lot of people roll their eyes at that and think it's kind of cynical and would nearly balk at it. But Galway did it, and you saw yesterday or on Saturday the net result of that. You saw the celebrations with Shane after he kicked a brilliant like a clutch free at the end of it to win it. What it meant to him obviously, but also what it meant to the group for him. And that I mean, like park football for a second, like that sure isn't that what a team is supposed to be? Like literally the definition of a team, like that you're united like that and supportive of each other. And regardless of what happens this year as a group, do they know that they have each other's backs and that there is that kind of that sense of unity about them. And to me, that was you saw it, like you saw the manifestation of that when your season's on the line. And I mean, I can imagine what halftime in Breffni Park must have been like when you're 8 points down to this Armagh team and you're hearing that Derry are level with Dublin. Uh, it must have been like very tempting to just descend into blind panic. But the way that they stood through that, I don't know their form. Like I wouldn't get overly carried away with that. But what I said about them as a group, I think was very impressive.
Where do you think that conversation's coming from? Because Shane obviously talked, it was as far as I'm aware, the Tuesday after the Derry game,
Yeah,
they had those conversations, but who's driving that or where did it come from? Like when you're looking in.
I it's that's a hard question to answer, and I tell you what, like it's a brave thing to do. Like there are teams, man. If you try that, like we all know it, like, they would roll their eyes and they would be nudging each other down the back of the room, or they wouldn't buy into it, or they wouldn't be willing to talk like that about their teammate. Um, and I mean, there was an ESRI study recently, and some of the things from that, I thought just there's a broader conversation maybe to have about is being part of an intercounty setup definitely benefiting these people's lives? Like, is it truly enhancing them? Not from a football sense, but just do they get what they should be getting out of this setup? And anytime you speak to this Galway group in particular, I don't know if it's coming from somebody within it or if it's just the profile of player they have inside in there. But Keen Darcy spoke about this recently about the how he has had a new perspective on football since or on his intercounty career since he went back into that setup. And I think it's a very admirable trait in this group. Like they were not perfect at the weekend. They haven't been perfect this year. They'll tell you that themselves. But it's just the amount of little moments in the game where you're like, this is just a team determined to, I mean, from their absolute stomach, like just this is real guts and glory stuff. Can you dig in and find a way? And I mean, you like Kieran, who was taken off, didn't go well against Dublin, had a family passing recently, missed the Derry game. And the first thing he does when he comes in is runs a full pelt, flicks the ball up, like off the ground, doesn't bend his back, kicks a brilliant ball into Rob Finley for a point. Matthew Tierney taken off, like hooked in the first half, comes back in, kicks a point, and then just gets his fingernails to a kick out directed to a Galway for a huge score. John Maher, who things weren't going well for, but diving like full length on Ross McQuillan's boot, just to deny a huge attack that led to a score again. Conor Sweeney, who comes on and was taken off again in the Connacht final, to come in and the impact he had was absolutely sensational. He kicked the point, won the kick out over Stephen Campbell, who's probably a foot taller than him, but he was just determined he was going to get there first, and creates a goal for his clubmate Robert Finley, who was also immense. So there's a lot of things there that I think uh, performance-wise, that's a conversation that they'll have, and there are definitely things that they're going to fix on that. But spirit-wise, like what they got out of that in the non-tangible stuff, I'd say is seismic.
I thought that even the moment of Shane at the end and the players around him, I know you were talking about it on Twitter and everything, but it was just a great moment. And even I thought Shane's point where the dummy solo on Rian O'Neill was just class.
And like he's such a gifted footballer. Like he is. I interviewed Gerard O'Donnell recently. He's Sophie Becker, the Olympian, her sprint coach, and he was telling me he was talking about the underage athletics development in Ireland, like just tracks. But he basically said, if you go anywhere, all these young kids, all they want to do is run fast. They just want to sprint. Like they don't really care about hurdles or mid distance. All they want to do is go boom, like take off. So he was talking about the ways that we should empower them to do that. And I was thinking about it in the football sense. And like, what's the thing when you're a kid, when you're watching football that you're just mad to do? Like, I'm sure we all just want to kick the leather off it. Like, try shots from the sideline, try shots from outside the 45, try them from the end line, curl them over. There's probably, I don't know, is there a more satisfying thing in Gaelic football than when a player like Shane Walsh catches the ball sweetly and you just know, like, you just know that. Did you notice for that very last before the umpire had reached for that flag, Paul Joyce was walking down the line towards Kieran McGeeney. Like he knew where that ball was going. And that was another example of that to me. Like as Rian O'Neill is sliding on his knees and he just catches that like perfectly. And you're like, there's no doubt where this is going. I think we're in a great age in Gaelic football where you have just those really, really sweet strikers. And like Rian O'Neill is actually one of them. Pat Haven from down last weekend is another one. But Shane is right up there in the top bracket of that. So when he catches the ball flush like that, it's just it's one of the things that we all dream of trying to do, and very few of us can actually get it right.
It is such a big positive though to have him back in this form, even on Saturday against Armagh, like Shane finishing with 9 points, even the free kicks to win the game. Like this is just massive for Galway football.
It is, and I mean, I, like Sean Kelly came out to us afterwards, and he wouldn't always be like the most hectic talker. He's a good talker, don't get me wrong, but he wouldn't necessarily. He's not going craving headlines or anything like that. Like a bit more measured in how he would approach it. But he was talking to us after the game, and he made I thought the point, and it wasn't necessarily something he was asked about. They had no doubt that they were still a good team. Like despite the talk over the last couple of weeks, or when you boil it down, he actually he asked me to go and fact check it, and I must do it. How many times in the last couple of years have they lost by more than a score? Like they are always there or thereabouts. You know that. So even though the results might not necessarily be going well, like was there a drastic difference in their performance in the last three games? I don't necessarily think so. But the difference is that they were the wrong side of a one-score game. They drew a game, and they're the right side of a one-score game. That's it. So it's that's from a performance perspective, they're at a certain level, but it's more like sometimes a point means more or is measured in more than on a table. I just think what they needed a release like that. Like they needed a chance to get a win, and despite how I'm sure they all knew they're a good team, there's nothing better than heading down the road with 2 points in the bag and knowing you're heading for knockout football. So yeah, I'd say they got an enormous lift out of it.
How sweet is it to beat Armagh by a point after what Galway went through last year?
I'll tell you why it's sweet for Galway because Armagh brought it on Saturday. Like, oh my man, they
Yeah,
are.
are you along the lines where Armagh want to Galway gone Saturday evening?
Yeah, they wanted to put them out. Like they were. Uh, they as good as I know it's not the thing we're talking about here. I walked out of that ground just so impressed by this Armagh bunch. Like great teams, they'll turn up regardless of the stakes. Like you play them in a challenge, and they have a chance at a two. Yeah, they will. Play them in a league game, they'll go after it. And a championship game where they've already qualified, and you can absolutely understand why they'd be putting the feet up. And geez, they brought it. Uh,
Mm.
so that was I think that was they threw a gauntlet down to Galway and they said you're getting nothing easy here, and to come through that, to know everybody in the ground knew that Armagh were you knew it within 10 minutes they were 4-0 up, started the game. Ethan Rafferty rolling up the pitch and kicking an absolutely outrageous two-pointer. So you knew that they came to play, and the fact that they Galway stared that down and came back the way that they did, and had to basically win this game twice. Got back up and then conceded five on the bounce, and were able to dig in again and earn that free at the end. And it's the players that did it for them. Like a really ballsy call and not starting Paul Conroy, and sure then he comes in and he issues a reminder to everybody, I'm still the footballer of the year here. Like I'm still gonna. He won a mark for the 2 point free that was brought forward for Shane. He kicked a point. He won the free at the end uh, that effectively won the game. So for that reason alone, the fact that they got the challenge that they got and came through it, I think they'll be very pleased.
You mentioned Conroy there. Keen Darcy again on Saturday. If he stays on his current trajectory, there's no way he doesn't get an All-Star. Like if we make it all the way to a final.
How does this fella win as many kickouts as he does constantly? Like I'm sure the teams know that he's such a weapon in the air, and there's so little they can do about it. He is immense in the air. Now he's more than that too. You saw the point he kicked on his right in the second half as well when they really needed it. But I mean, you can see why Galway put so much value and time into getting him to where he is at now, because he when things were going against him during that stretch there, and I mean like Paul, they made some huge calls here. I mean, to put in Conor Flaherty, I know it would have been a conversation locally for the last couple of weeks, but to actually go and do it was a big call. Uh, so trying to vary up their kick out, the couple of adjustments they made at halftime, I thought were pretty clever as well. So, but sorry to answer your question, yeah, I mean his form at the minute is just brilliant. He's such an unbelievable ability to when you're really under the gun, you put the ball down on top of this fella and he'll get you out of a hole.
I thought I don't know if you listened to the podcast. It was after the Dublin game where we had Kenny Knockton on, who used to manage Ballyboden originally, going man. But he talked about Keen Darcy showing up for Ballyboden at the first time, and he talked about him in the gym straight away, and they were just about like how much he was lifting at that time, and then he talked then about like being he was in contact then with the goal management after this with the performances Darcy was given, but like since Ballyboden, it's just, and even going on last year from the All Ireland final, it's incredible the performances he's been putting in this year.
And the thing is, I mean, I sometimes I'm kind of uncomfortable with the conversation around Keane Darcy as being just an animal or just, physically what he brings. Yeah, that's obviously true, but uh, watching him live on kickouts, this guy's a smart footballer. I mean, the amount of movement he does on the ground to make sure that his positioning is right, that if he's not jumping, he's clearing the path, and his communication is, I mean, very, very rarely if Galway have two jumpers up on one ball, would it be Keane Darcy be one of them? Like, he's on top of that. He just takes ownership of that element of the game. So he's really intelligent in how he's able to use his body, and if he's not getting up in the air, clear a path for somebody else.
Just on it, then you mentioned Conor Flaherty early on. How surprised were you when it came through that Conor Flaherty was? Am I right in saying first start in championship for Galway?
The New York game, I'd say, was it? That was his the did he start the New York game? I think he did.
Yeah,
But other than that, it's his no, he didn't start the New York game, did he? Jeez, I'm losing it.
I don't think he did. I think it
Uh,
was.
so I was. I'm sure you were the same. Like the
Yeah,
stuff mill was going heavy during the week last week. So there was a lot of talk about potential changes or not potential changes, and that was definitely one that was much speculated. Uh, Usually you just tend to ignore that kind of stuff because their strike record is a lot worse than it is accurate. But I was surprised. I was surprised. I tell you what, I was most surprised, Paul.
sorry,
That
he
I've
did.
been
He did start that New York game. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Um, I was most surprised by it because there was a lot of talk about it, and then the two lads came off to do their warm up, Conor Gleeson and Conor Flaherty. Conor Gleeson was very diligent practicing his kickouts down in one side goal. Conor Flaherty spent 10 minutes kicking two pointers, and I said, okay, this fella's not playing anyway. And then you see just the type of fella he is that when they came out to do the proper warm up, he was engaged. And when the news came through that he was actually going to play, I thought there was a noticeable difference in Galway's kick out with him there, particularly in the amount of times he tried to clip kind of a mid-range kick out to the wing. Sometimes there was detriment. There was one that went over the wing, and I mean, you could tell management were not happy with that. And he visibly held his hand up to the sideline in a show of apology for that one not coming off. But it was clear that he tried to vary that, the 45 to 65 kick out, tried to get that off a bit more. So I was really surprised. I think maybe some people thought he was coming in to do like a Ethan Rafferty and get up the pitch, but you saw quickly, no, this was purely about kickouts. That's why he's there. I think it'll be interesting to see does he actually start against Down now as well, given how that game went. So, uh, yeah, to answer your question, I was very surprised.
It's nothing against Conor Gleeson, but does he not have to start now for his own development as an inter-county goalkeeper?
I Yeah, that's really tricky. Like, I think he probably does, but I'm not necessarily sure confident if that will happen. Um, I, this game you're playing against Armagh, and you're very, very conscious of how good they are around the middle, and you know if you continue to go along on top of them, they're too good. They're way too good. So you need to maximize hands on ball way more, and that's what Connor was brought in for. But I, there might be an element of horses for courses for it. My personal perspective is he brought him in, and now that he's there, give him the down game as well. You should have a fine option in Conor Gleeson, that's without question. But I mean, they made some big calls before the last game, as they showed. I wouldn't be surprised to see them make big calls again.
Yeah, like there was good and bad, like with Flaherty on Saturday night, but I think as well I know the New York game and everything, but like Conor Flaherty hasn't experienced this kind of environment as a goalkeeper.
And that's the thing. I mean, they're trying to get used to. You just can't replicate an atmosphere like that. Uh, it's a really difficult thing to. Uh, Again, football's in a very funny stage at the minute where you've got a lot of. Uh, when I was, the last couple of years, we used to have maybe slight difficulty in picking young players of the year, like standout guys who are excelling at an early age, and it might take them a couple of years to come in and make their mark. And now what you're seeing, I think we're on the cusp of actually a golden age. Like the amount of very, very young players who are just coming in and immediately making their mark. Like I'm talking across the board here. Finn Barrorty, 19-year-old from Donegal, who's just been absolutely excellent. Kieran Moore is 22. Kelly McConnell is 22. Connor Duke kicked 5 points against Kerry is 20. Um, Owen McAvoy is 21. Rory Forbes is 19, I'd say. Theo Clancy, 21. Matthew Thompson, 20. Been absolutely sensational. But the reason I think maybe you didn't see those players come through, A, was a physical thing. B, coming in and making your American championship was so, so difficult. Like being
Mm.
exposed to that is really, really hard. And the fact that Galway were able to, or that Connor was able to come in and get through that, it'll stand to him tenfold. Like regardless of the experience he's had previously or a couple of league games he had before that, just getting, I'm thinking about the two to his right that just slightly overcooked and went over the line. Uh, they're kind of mistakes that in essence you kind of need to make, and then you saw the reaction to that, and how they went afterwards. So no, I think definitely you're right. What he would get out of that, just being exposed to the All Ireland champions, putting a real squeeze on you, making a couple of mistakes and having to bounce back from it. No more than what we spoke about with Shane Walsh earlier, and maybe kicking it wide and being able to reset and go again. That is it's a really admirable quality in any player.
Overall, when you look at the Galway performance, and even if you're looking at the first half, when it was 15-7 to Armagh at the break, how concerned were you?
So it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, we're way better in stretches in the first half, but at the same time, you were saying Galway have missed two penalties here. Just looking at my notes, Shane Walsh kicked a shot short, penalty saved. Cook over kicked the ball down the line. Robert Finley kicked the wide. Walsh missed another two, and then they missed the 45. So that's a lot to leave behind you. You are making some opportunities there. Find it very difficult to get on top of Rafferty's kick out, and their switch from kind of zonal to man was very noticeable to me, and that definitely worked. So I didn't think Galway are gone. And I wasn't there, but definitely were. Geez, when I'm asked that like that, and they're just they were so impressive, and their 2 point kicking ability. It's funny, like all the criticism Galway got for kicking or trying 2 pointers over the last couple of weeks, and Armagh come out and so no, there's nothing wrong with this as long as you're nailing them. So Niall Grimley kicks an absolute worldie. Darren McMullen, another fella, actually 21-year-old again, kicked a deadly one. Rafferty kicked his one. They kicked a free. You weren't. I mean, it wasn't major panic stations. I definitely saw maybe the couple of changes that they needed to make. Liam Selk had a bug during the week, and they took him off at half time, and Matthew Tierney had also come off at that stage too. But you were definitely saying, no matter what happens here, the next this first phase after half time is going to be absolutely crucial. Like because this, if this slides, it could slide fast.
Yeah, the penalties when they missed two. Like, what were you thinking then? Do you think it's penalty taker needs to change now or anything? Or
I like Matthew's track record is pretty good with them.
yeah,
You know, famously he kicked the one that won the game in the quarterfinal against Armagh in 2022. He just went slightly too high with his first one, and then the fact he didn't take the second one, I thought was kind of interesting. And it looked like to me that Shane actually wanted to take it, but Robert Finlay took it. And again, you would have backed him typically to hit that. So um, I don't think it's it's not a major panicking thing. It's obviously not ideal if you win two penalties. Now the second one was probably on the soft variety. I would have thought. But no, I mean I wouldn't overreact to one miss for Tierney or one miss for Finnerty. The reality is they probably have three really good takers there, and you would back them more often than not to nail it. It just you were getting flashbacks, weren't you, to Crack on Shannon and miss penalty and thinking, oh, we're going to be talking about this for another. It's going to be another torturous discourse of missed penalties and missed frees for after this game. So it's more the fact that they were able to respond the way they did inside the second half that you would give them a bit of credit.
you mentioned it early on as well about the spirit and the character, but on 53 minutes, Killy McDade pushes Galway 116 to 17 ahead, and then Armagh go back into the lead 116 to 22 on 59 minutes. Like you did mention it, Galway did have to win this game twice.
Yeah, that stretch from Armagh, like the Ross McQuillan points, Charlie O'Byrne's, Ethan Rafferty catching a kick out and then kicking a point from it. Tierney Kelly and Charlie O'Byrne's just coming for like five on the bounce was again a real show of strength. They really surged there, and I thought you knew. I mean, whatever happened at that moment where it's 22 to 116, you're like, geez, Galway really needs somebody to just a bit like that Derry game, get something on the board here, just get us into the game. And the man that does it is Carl Sweeney. I mean, I just think it's what a sign of a fella that I don't think the kind of final ended the way that he would have wanted it to. But he came into that game absolutely determined to save their season. And that's what he did. He a brilliant point, won a kick out over Stephen Campbell and created a goal for Robert Finnerty. I thought all the Sawtail lads actually had huge moments in the game. Like Daniel Flaherty, another fella who came in absolutely determined to make his mark. Matthew Thompson is just in. He just looks to the manner born. He's so ready for this. But that yeah, of all of them, Sweeney digging in like that and just stemming the tide, creating the goal, and then suddenly you're back in the game. Even Andrew Mernon actually gets up. I thought he hardly got a kick for 15. Well, Sean Fitzgerald was on him. He was hardly in the game, but then he split his eyebrow and went off, and he kicked the point. And Galway responded really well to that again. So yeah, it's not obviously ideal that they were hit for 5 points on the bounce is not ideal. Easier said than done to stem that tide, and it's more the way that they're able to dig themselves out of it that I think that if they're reviewing on that spell this week, their focus will be on look at how he responded when he took another punch.
Question that came in from a listener here, Maurice. Jared Anthony B is his name. On Twitter, that he came in with a question. After an excellent league campaign and a stellar outing on Saturday, what does Daniel O'Flaherty need to do to get a start? And no, I'm not related to him, nor have I met him. Um,
Um,
what do you think of that?
I mean, he's an absolute weapon. I actually asked Park after the game about how difficult is it to pick a team right now because, I mean, the 2024 All Ireland final team is is in danger of being kind of transformed here. Like you've got a lot of potential change that,
13, I think
and
we were counting on
then
Friday
uh,
that, or well, that was named start originally. But that obviously went down to 11 with Gleason and
with
Conroy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, with so and I mean I think there's a couple of really big selection calls for them here, but like so I get the point, and he definitely has a case to be made to come in. There's a bit of this kind of Stephen Campbell vibes about certain players too, though, that you just know you're absolutely going to get an impact when this guy comes in. Like Paul Conroy had such an amazing impact. That has he now kind of got Brass in this position as being this sensational impact sub who's going to come in the last 20, 25 minutes and do a version of what he did. I think there's a couple of players in that bracket. I can absolutely see why if you're looking aside and you see Daniel Flaherty coming on at that stretch of a game, you're thinking, oh no, not this guy's just gonna you're gonna have to be braking at high speed, chasing him down the other way. So I can see why maybe Galway would be thinking wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have this guy in our locker to come in and effectively guarantee an impact.
Another question that came in, why are Galway so slow out of the blocks? It's happened too often to be a coincidence. We've had sluggish starts in various degrees against New York, Mayo, Dublin, Derry, and Armagh. Is that a concern?
I don't think so because despite their I know that they were what were they? They were 4 points down
Yeah.
at the start of this game, but that's they've created a chance for Walsh. They've won the penalty with a really nice break. Hughes, like just a lovely kind of hand pass into Flaherty, and you're not that far away from being at the exact same juncture 7 minutes into this game, and it's 1-1 to 4 points. So I didn't think Galway. I mean, from the very start of it, I'm going off memory here now, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Armagh win the throw in, kick a ball into Andrew Mernon. Fitzgerald strips it off him, uh, and Nick Gallery kind of are on the ball then. Um, Rafferty kicks Cook kicks the ball over the line at the end of that. Rafferty kicks the two, and then they have the other chance with Walsh. So it wasn't like they were struggling to get their hands on the ball or that they were standoffish or anything like that. I think it was more was a desperate combination of that miss, the penalty miss, Armagh coming forward and kicking some absolutely outrageous 2 pointers as well. So it wouldn't be, it's not ideal, obviously, but it wouldn't be a major concern based on that game anyway.
Peter Cook first start then. We haven't mentioned him first starting goal in over 2 years in Championship football.
Yeah, and I thought he really put his hand up to when things weren't going well, just got on a lot of ball. You know, that midfield combination is a tricky thing to get right because of the amount of options you have there. So, I mean, part of me kind of, I would, my preference might be actually to see him in the half forward line, like as an 11 or 12, and maybe if that means Keen Darcy coming back, but, uh, he's back, he's tracking Niall Grimley at certain stages defensively and things like that as well, where, uh, but I mean, it's brilliant to see him back. Like it is absolutely just to have that option there again and develop this depth that we want to have is very encouraging.
People might be sick of me talking about this player on the podcast, but I do have to bring him up. I've been banging the drum for the last few weeks. I want to see him in this starting 15, but he wasn't in it, didn't come on. John Daly at the weekend. I was quite surprised by that now.
Yeah, me too. It's more. I think that's honestly, Paul, is a more reflection of the depth that they have in the squad than anything else. Like I mean, I heard you talking about him after the Derry game, rightly, and I think it's just a very tricky thing when you're. What happened at the very start of this game, right? What you're looking down your notes, and before the throw in, Rian O'Neill runs into the corner forward position, so at the goal that they're shooting into, and the player who runs back in on cornerback on him is Kenny McDade. So Galway clearly has identified, okay, this guy roams and he's a bit of a runner, so we're going to try and match that. So that's what they did. They brought him back inside there, which means your other matchups are now going to be slightly deviating based on that. So your six isn't necessarily always going to be a six. He might be up the pitch as Sean Kelly was. Sean Fitzgerald was going to take Andrew Mernon, and that's what he did, and did that very, very well. Johnny McGrath was going to take Conor Herbert, and again did that well. I actually thought Galway went more man on man as the game went on, as opposed to maybe they approached slightly differently early on. But I keep going back to it, Paul. It's a horses for courses thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come in if it's a game where a game like the Derry game, for argument's sake, where you need that kind of kick passer from there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe change up their full back line depending on who's coming in where. So I think it was they picked the team for the opposition and they picked the. I mean, as Porter reminded us afterwards, there's people up and down the country picking Galway teams, but it's his job as manager to pick the right one. And you just have to hold your hands up and say they got I think the big calls they made, they got them right.
What would the team be on Sunday that Maurice Brosnan would actually start? Not what you think the team would be, but what would the team you'd like to start?
I think I would go to same 15, except maybe Daniel Flaherty for Jacqueline. It's a conversation to be had.
And then Liam Silk back to four, is it?
So one, not a fear, but this Derry team have frightening pace. I mean, down, sorry.
Yeah.
Holy hell, man, they are rapid, like all over the pitch. I mean, you saw it, like, even like personality, Laverty is a man marker, but the man can move. Danny Guinness, Danny McGill, wow, that guy's just got huge pace. Or Murdoch, not quite as fast, but a real athlete, like, is brilliant in the air. So go back to this horses for courses idea. I think Galway are going to want a very, very mobile half back line, especially. That's going to be really important in this game. And then maybe like the Padhaver matchup will be really interesting. What did they do? A bit like a Shane McGuigan, but maybe a small bit more physical. So is that a Sean Fitzgerald or is it a Johnny McGrath? Is will be a pretty intriguing call. But sorry, to answer your question, go back to this idea of horses for courses. I think you're going to. This is a pace. These are a really pacey team. I don't think Galway have typically dealt well with that profile of opposition. You go back to the Dublin game, is in that bracket for me. Kerry in the league, they don't tip. They had a very this in the old rules. They had a very good record against older teams for a reason, I thought. So I think you might see slight adjustments based on that to make sure that they are able to match them where they need to match them.
Does Carl Sweeney not need to start after the impact he made?
Another man who is in that bracket of when you make an impact like that, have you nearly shoehorned yourself in as being a guaranteed uh, impact from the bench? His athletic profile means he is definitely a contender to get in, but um, you know, I there's a I think Galway are their team selection is a very interesting thing, right? And there's players who if it came down to it in Ireland final, we need them to be firing on all cylinders, regardless maybe necessarily if how well or not they have played. So Dylan McHugh's form isn't where it was this time last year, but Dylan McHugh at his best is a player that Galway are really going to need. And is it worth trusting that he's going to find that? In my opinion, yes. So you stick with him and hope that as things start to come together, and he could have early on in the game could have had been very influential in terms of setting up the penalty and things like that. So Liam Silk had, as far as I know, had a bug last week, and that was obviously had its impact in terms of him coming off at half time. But as long as that's cleared up, you can see them resolving that. And then otherwise, I mean, I don't see scope for massive changes. I think they landed on something there. They've got their depth is without a doubt. It is undeniable that they have got some really serious options to come in as well, and that's where you want to be.
Seems at the minute our biggest strength and depth is in defence.
Yeah, and yeah, I think so. No, it's uh, uh, what it's funny, Paul. I was thinking about it a lot last week. Like what was Galway's issue? Like why did they not beat Derry, and why did they lose to Dublin, and maybe why was their form a bit kind of patchy over a couple of weeks? And there's been a lot of very interesting stuff. Galway are an interesting team, so people tend to focus on them a lot, and there's a lot of focus maybe on their 2 point kicking or things like this or their attack. That would have been an ongoing conversation. I listened to the Sunday game when when Galway are going well, it's because they're very smart with the new rules. When they're not going well, it's because they're too obsessed with the new rules. Or this kind of thing. It can kind of vary depending on it veers a lot depending on as Sean Kelly said, it might only be a point in the difference, but the conversation is absolutely worlds apart. I was driving down to this game in the car and I like the football pod, which I love, but Paddy Andrews said Galway were as bad against Dublin as Mayo were against Cavan. That's just like the Galway team were lost by a point against Dublin, who were all hurling as their best performance in a year, and they were somehow as bad as a Mayo team who were turned over by that Cavan side. I couldn't see it. From a performance basis, I just could not see where that was going. But they weren't perfect, right? And in my opinion, their issue wasn't actually in their attack. I think it's their defense. It's been their hallmark of this team for the last couple of years. It's something that they pride themselves on. Really, really good, like textbook, old school, stand up defending. And it slipped definitely against Derry. They conceded 3 goals in 2 games. This is a team. There was times last year we were talking about they've only conceded a goal in the entire championship. So I think that would have been a major focus for them over the last kind of 2 weeks is to make sure. And I know they conceded, what was it, 27 points? Is it? Uh, yeah, 27 points,
Yeah.
24 scores. But in the News, not bad going. And very, very robust in terms of not conceding goals as well. So that sense of their structure I thought was pretty good. And the great thing is you've got like the options you have there now, depending on what's coming down the tracks. Like another reminder as to Kieran's ability when he came in at the weekend. Sweeney to me is actually better coming onto the ball as a wing back than he is as a wing forward for argument's sake. Daniel Flaherty is an absolute super option. You've already mentioned John Daly, so they've got Sean McCurran. Obviously, a lot of people would have been surprised to see him come out of the team last weekend. They've got some some huge options there, without a shadow of a doubt. Um, Now there's a bit of versatility there too in terms of, as I said, I think there is scope maybe that you could push Peter Cook up the pitch a bit. I would like to see him at 11. I think there's the scope, the way he's very, very kind of selfless and is able to create around him pretty well. So I think there would be scope to do something like that. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, their defensive options are definitely their strongest.
The reaction to Down is nearly funny. People are probably thinking that this, a lot of people are thinking this is a foregone conclusion that Galway go up to Newry and get a result this weekend. I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, really. Like, you look at Down yesterday, you're impressed with them. Jack McCarron gets away with an obvious pick off the ground, Monaghan get a goal, and like Down were right in that game if that goal isn't awarded.
Yeah, yeah. No, the first thing I could not agree with you more. The first thing I would say though, like I don't think that would be an issue for this group. That you're
Mhm.
right, there is a bit of complacency around the place that uh, is a bit odd, let's say, but I don't think it would inflect them whatsoever. I mean, I thought Down were very unlucky at the weekend, and if for argument's sake it was Monaghan that got her playing and not Down, how much different would this conversation be? And what is that based on? So a couple of things that I think will be really interesting to see. There's not been a more brave keeper in the championship to me than Ronan Burns. He's 20-year-old, came in. I actually, the day of his 20th birthday, he played against Donegal. I watched that game back because his kickouts were kind of interesting when I saw the map. And what stood out to me actually was he was just making outrageous saves. And his ability to make sure that they're very creative in how they get their kickouts off. And then once they get hands on ball, they're really athletic. They're not just, they're not a Kilcoo. Like they're not just a running team. They can kick. You see that goal they scored in the first half. Their ability to actually kick the ball is definitely there. So Galway should be beaten. It's a team that wants to get to an All-Ireland final. It's a game that they should be winning, but it will be a serious test. And they know that. I was thinking about it today. Uh, in 2022, Galway played down in a league game, and they went up. They had 27 or 28 players on the bus, um, and Liam Silk got sick. I think on the way up. I'm pretty sure I have the story right. Liam Silk got sick on the way up, and Park Joyce decided to throw in a debutant for his first game that day, and it was Johnny
Johnny
McGrath.
McGrath,
Yeah,
yeah,
in
yeah.
cornerback. Um, and Galway won that game by 5 or 6. I'd say Shane Walsh was going really well at the time. Um, I think that, it was a very young, like, Tony Gill came on as well, I think, and maybe Colin Sweeney came on that day too. So it's a team that they will not, they haven't played each other since then. Obviously, since championship has been even longer, but people can see the trajectory of this down team run. They can see what Conor Laverty has done there. I think as a management team, they won't. This idea that maybe Galway will be sleepwalking in here to what happened to Kerry against Meath or Dublin before that, I don't see it. Like I think that they will know what's coming down the tracks.
Fitton O'Toole actually had a great tweet today. I was reading it. So Galway obviously playing down this weekend, but 20 years after, Michael Meehan and Sean Armstrong scored hat-tricks in the All-Ireland under
The
21
3-1 game,
final.
yeah.
And that day, Conor Laverty scored 1-2 and Galway won 6-5 to 4-6.
Oh, I remember some of the headlines around that. There was some really cringy, terrible twins comparisons going around at the
Yeah,
time. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, the managing the turnaround in itself will be tricky for Galway, but like uh, they know what's coming down the track. They will have done their due diligence over the last couple of weeks. I think they had somebody at the Kerry game, at the Kerry Mead game last weekend in case that was going to be a game. I know Park was in the Hyde Park on Sunday for the Roscommon game, or for the Mayo Donegal game too. So they would have had a bit of prep done already for what's coming here. The turnaround is tight, but they'll have their homework done.
yeah, that day it was Michael Meehan 3-2, Sean Armstrong 3-1 in that
Yeah, man.
21 final. Just on that turnaround, do you think it is going to be a challenge?
Sure has to be, but they did it last year and were able to navigate it successfully. But yeah, it's not definitely not ideal to have to come through this route. Um, and particularly given, still you just every team. I often the more you talk to intercounty players, the more thing you realize everybody's hurt. People lads are playing with you. If you were to park your car up beside Santry on a Friday night and you would see intercounty players coming in and out there for injections before games of the weekend, it's just the reality of what they're doing. If you watch lads getting off the team bus beforehand, you start to realize the same fellas are carrying hot waters because they haven't strapped their back on the bus or they're icing up their ankles or this. Everybody's dealing with stuff, and 3 games in 3 weeks means that, as in many weeks, means that that is a serious test on that. Like physically, that'll be a real challenge. So, I that's where your squad will really stand to you, hopefully, and the depth that we spoke about earlier should be a real bonus in that regard.
What sort of game do you think we can expect between Down and Galway?
Uh, I I'd say if you're looking at down analysing Galway, I think they'll worry about their defensive matchups on some of Galway's forwards. Um, Shane Walsh got the man of the match and headlines rightly for what he did last weekend. Robert Finlay is just man, he is on it at the minute. Like he's our most consistent forward for the last 18 months. He's done that because he has to, given the two lads who are out. But like in the two
Every time he plays well, you're thinking of what could have been if he stayed on the All Ireland last year.
don't get me started on that. Um, like I mean, yeah, he's just like what he scored 310 from 16 shots in his last 3 games. He's also 7 assists. Uh, you can see at the weekends, all this talk about not having a weaker foot. He's putting that to bed anyway. He seems determined to show that he has the right foot in his locker as well. He's just he's really, really on it at the minute, which is very encouraging to see. At kind of clutch moments too, like the goal was the way he settled himself before he just started under was a big, big score. The 2 pointer he kicked against Dublin in the first half when things weren't going well, a similar thing again where he snapped it over. So uh, I think they'd worry about the if you're looking at it, I think down are looking at Matthew Thompson and how his tendency to try and create things around him, uh, Shane Walsh and Robert Finley. That's tricky. That is really tricky. So I'd say if they're looking at it, they're worried about how they're going to hold Galway's forwards. If Galway are looking at it, they're worried about down space.
Just on it too, obviously this Down Galway game, GA plus 145. What is your view about the four prelim games being on GA plus this weekend? Obviously, it's something that we've all known since the start of the year, but how do you view it?
I'll tell you what, my view is not as important now as it would have been if Galway got Kerry. Can you imagine the weak conversation we would have been in for if those two teams was locked away on pay-per-view? Uh, but like my preference right now is can we see as many games as possible, regardless of where they're at. This is I'm just speaking purely me looking on it. We've got cameras at basically every single games. Why do we not try and maximize that and just make sure that games are available somewhere for people to watch them. So that, there was games last weekend that weren't shown anywhere, like the Kerry Mead game for argument's sake, and you miss a stunning shock. So where I'm at right now, I'm not like I'm not up in arms about the reality that J Plus is there. I think it's a good service. Uh, the crash last weekend was definitely frustrating. There's no doubt about that, and that's probably not something that's tolerable. But I'm, you know, you've got you're looking ahead to this weekend, and you've got the two hurling quarterfinals, which are very anticipated. The Tailteann games in Croke Park, which deserve a bit of a pedestal to make sure that that competition is a success, and the four games. And you can watch if you wanted to sit down and watch all eight games, you can. It's not ideal that some of them are it's a bit of an overlap, but every single one of these games is available somewhere. And for me, I'm happy with that. It's the same thing as a club championship. I mean, I'm more than happy to pay for Galway GAA TV if it means that I can watch as many games as I'm going to watch. So I I'm not up in arms about it. I appreciate that some people are frustrated about it or whatever, but it just for me, progress is being able to watch games.
I was chatting to some people over the weekend who watched this game in the Galway pub between Galway and Armagh, and some of the comments were, "Why the hell is the URC final on? We're in Galway." And do you know, I think that is frustrating though. If you like are in your county, you can't get to the game, and do you know, but then some pubs aren't getting GA plus and different bits and pieces. That's where it does obviously become frustrating.
Of course it does, and I mean I'm not blind to that. Like that, it's not, and definitely just from a health of the sport perspective, it would be preferable if if some of these brilliant games were actually shown on national TV. I have to say, I mean, one of the most encouraging things for me working this year has been that just the nature of the conversation, the general vibe around football has changed. We're not locked in this relentless campaign of talking down the sport and what we're actually watching. And it happened periodically last year. No matter what happened in the game, there would have been this conversation about the state of the sport and that kind of thing. And it does feel like people are a bit more positive around football. And if you could spread that even further by putting games on national broadcaster, all the better. But that said, I'm glad that we can actually see these games. And I think, if anything, I'd be slightly more critical of the idea that some games weren't shown at all. It doesn't bother me that the games are where they are because at least you can watch them. The same thing will apply to me for the rest of the year. For the club championship games, I'll be in the exact same bracket. I'm more than happy to have the opportunity to watch these games because ultimately that's what it comes down to. Can you make them available first, and then maybe worry about what comes after that afterwards?
So just on it for a quarter final perspective, obviously next weekend it'll be a third weekend and Trollope go get through this weekend. They'll play Tyrone, Monaghan or Meath. All Ireland conversation, where are Pork Choice's side currently for you?
They're below Armagh anyway because of the route Armagh have here and the fact that they're not going to have this 3 games in 3 weeks. So they're definitely not there. And I probably put Donegal ahead of them right now as well. I would go back to Sean Kelly's points, Paul. Like getting too low or too high based on results is probably not a healthy way to do it, and it's definitely not the way that a football team should think about themselves. And there's been no harm in maybe taking a degree of that sense that maybe holding our hands up and saying, okay, the kind of final performance wasn't amazing and there might have been a bit fortunate, but there's a lot of hallmarks of what happened last year here. I mean, a league campaign that they could have been relegated this year, they could have been relegated last year. The kind of final, yeah, maybe on the right side of the breaks there. Went into the group stages last year, went into that last game, and you weren't necessarily sure after the Westmeath game where they were at. Went into the last group game this year in a similar bracket, and things start to look healthier and healthier as the season goes on, and they catch a bit of form. And on that trajectory, you'd be reasonably encouraged. So there is, there's no doubt there's a route there. There's a route, but a lot of things still have to go right, and that's the brutal reality of elite level sport is that the amount of things that can trip you up that you can plan for so many different elements of it, and it can all still come down to some very fine margins. So they're probably in that kind of just outside the top 2, 3 bracket, but they're not much further than that. And on their day, there's not a team in the country that would like to see Galway coming, and there's not a team in the country that they wouldn't be able to beat.
Do you think it's helped that say if they do get to a quarter final, obviously have to get through down, but that they've been through this 3 week route last year and they've been through it successfully?
I think it does help, but it would have been preferable not to do it. I
Yeah,
just that the route is it's just a gauntlet, you know. I think definitely will be taxing. And I mean they put what they put into last Saturday night for argument's sake was massive. Now it's not a bad turnaround, 8 days. You know, the fact that you go Saturday to Sunday, like when you consider Cavan, like poor Cavan have to go on to Killarney playing on a Sunday and a Saturday. That is tricky, you know. Um, so and we'll see what happens in a qualifying. But if you got another 7 day turnaround, that might be a small benefit too. But it will help. The thing I said to you earlier, the thing walking out of Breffni Park on Saturday, the thing I was thinking was I can imagine the vibe in that place now must be absolutely brilliant. Like they just must be buzzing, and that emotional payoff is probably worth everything else, like the physical cost. Uh, so if you can ride that into the down game, get another positive performance, then yeah, you take it. You take this route. It's still not. It definitely isn't ideal.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, anyways, Galway can get through this weekend. It's 1:45 on Sunday, for Nuri, for people making the trip and for anyone who isn't live on GA Plus, of course. But that's all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks a million to Maurice for coming on.